Welcome to the QMed Academy Talks. This session is about clinical investigations, very important topic. I have with me here today, again, Søren, who is our subject matter expert at QMed, and we are going to walk you through the different steps preparing for a clinical investigation with a new innovative device. So welcome, Søren.
Thank you, Helena.
So let's start out. How do we actually plan for a clinical study? Where do we start? What is the origin for these for the input, the device, of course? But
yeah, well, it's I think for most devices, once they start their process, there is a certain expectation of a clinical study, and to put it in context and make it into a document, it's called a clinical development plan. And that is sort of bridging your clinical study documents with your regulatory documents. So within your clinical development plan, you are setting the stage of your different needed studies.
Which is coming from where? Where did you define the studies?
They are coming...
Previous session.
They come, of course, also from your preclinical testing, but they also come sort of the definition of the study types comes from the ISO 14155 study standard. But if we go back to our user needs and our requirement specifications, we had these values that we needed to check up on. And so we've gone through a process of developing, justifying, getting plans and reports into our QMS. Everything is good. We have design freezed, so we are ready to go into a clinical study. And then in your clinical evaluation, you get some parameters that you want to measure. And these parameters needs to be reflected in the requirement specifications. So there needs to be a link from requirement specifications into your objectives in your clinical evaluation to the output of your clinical study.
So your endpoints.
Yes, exactly, your endpoints. And that can be safety, it can be performance, it can be benefit, depending on what your device does. The design of the study, that depends a lot on your device. It depends a lot on the procedure your device is used in. It depends a lot on the patient and the user. So it's really difficult to go into specifics, because I think even when we need to talk to clients on how to make a clinical study, we review each case separate. Of course, if you have two of the same device, the process pretty much the same, but for devices that do different stuff, we need to evaluate each of them. And that would be done in the clinical development plan.
Wouldn't you also say that some input, you said clinical evaluation, so I think you already said it, but if you have a similar device that has gone through first in man, early feasibility, all the time, you would not be able to jump directly into a pivotal trial. It would be expected that you do the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course, there are instances where this does not apply because let's say that the common user of your device is so well known within using that type of device that has actually created a precedence for your device to get in. Then you might be able to skip first in man.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, so it's sort of, it's really difficult to evaluate without having a specific device, and that's why the plan is so important, because you need to know that. Is there a long history of using this device type? Well, then that is your justification of going directly into a pivotal trial. We see that quite a lot, actually, with devices, that there is a long precedence of using a device type, and then they jump directly to a pivotal study.
Yeah. And the CDP that we started with, or the clinical development plan, CDP, is there a specific format for that? Is it Is this where you have, for instance, protocol synopsis incorporated, or is that too detailed? What are the requirements for these documents?
For the requirements, most of it actually comes from MDR. There isn't a guidance document on it at the moment. There might come. And the output of it, when we do it, is looking like a summary that you would have in your clinical investigation plan. And that summary then it cannot be directly transferred, but the idea is that your clinical development plan has reviewed the background literature, clinicaltrials.gov, and the European sites for ongoing studies and recruiting studies. And then you compare that, look at the background, look at your objectives. Is it comparable? What can be expected? And then you set the stage of how you want to reach your requirement specifications. And that is dependent on your device.
So let's continue on the other important documents and systems to manage a clinical study. And I know that we would need clinical evaluations moving forward under the MDR. Clinical evaluation plan is often required for the submission process. But then I think the very important part is actually to start involving the sites, getting the site documents ready, especially the contract with the sites that you're going to work with. The sites, I mean hospitals.
Yeah.
And this contracting process, for me at least, I think is normally can be very easy sometimes, but it's not often.
No.
Because you need to go through the legal process at the hospitals. There are certain requirements to the physicians and the other staff that are going to work on the study. And especially I know in regards to training, as an example in Germany, there are specific requirements. So it takes a long time from when you have frozen your design that you can actually start. Of course, you can work in parallel, but normally this is underestimated how long time it takes.
Yeah,
because you have to understand that the hospitals, their first priority is the patients.
Yeah.
Even though that we pay them money to be part of these trials, first priority is patients, production, then actually normally it is publications. And this is why they're interested also in clinical studies and to benefit the patients by new innovations and so on.
Yeah.
Of other clinical documents internally, I was just thinking if there are other. We have the clinical evaluation, we will have the protocol in place, we have the ISO to support that.
The investigator's brochure is definitely one of those where, and there is actually just released, but there is released MGCG guidance on investigator's brochure.
Yeah.
And I think from earlier, where now that there is a guidance, a manufacturer also needs to remember that the requirements set from the competent authorities, they rely on the guidance. And if you look in the guidance, there is actually a high requirement on the preclinical testing as well.
Yeah.
And reporting on that.
Yeah. And I think also for the understanding for these for the companies that are looking into these sessions, understanding that the investigator's brochure is actually a summary like the technical file on that specific prototype. So it means how you're going to sign as the responsible in the company that this product is safe and performs except for the parameters that you're going to test in the clinical study.
Yeah.
That means all the documents needs to be ready and aligned with that prototype.
Yeah.
So not the final product, of course, but with that prototype that you are going to test.
Yeah.
You cannot skip the risk assessment, the biocompatibility. Animals comes before patients, so you need to have biocompatibility in place. There are verification testings, for instance, heart valves. you need to do the full testing of the fatigue, for instance, and stents and so on, before you move into patients. So this is the way that is the Helsinki Declaration that you just mentioned, you know, patients after the animals. So IB is really a huge document. It's like your technical file with all the summaries and justifications. So that's very important. Your patient information is important. That's the information that is linked both to all your testings and the information on the study. Usability aspects. What are you going to tell to the patients together with the instructions for use? So it is like you would go to market the product, but really early stage testing what's missing, right?
And labeling is also a part of it.
Labeling,
Informed consent forms. It is. It's sort of like a separate. You have your technical documentation, which is all your regulatory documents, but in the same manner, I know maybe go into a little more depth about these clinical trial management systems, because there are so many documents that go into a clinical trial. Sponsor evaluations, monitoring plans, monitoring visits, all these kind of documents that are as such not part of your technical documentation, but still something you need to have in a format that you can also show when asked for it.
Yeah, I think there are systems available that can help you have the oversight, which is actually a word that you will that the authorities, if they do an inspection, they will look after that you have the oversight of the study. Like if they go and inspect a hospital, they would want to see that the principal investigator, the PI, has the oversight. And this oversight, if it's a very complex study, so many sites, many countries, complex products, a lot of follow-ups, you are not in a good place if you don't have the oversight. And this is where these systems can help you and make some processes really much easier. And it will also help the sites. A lot of these systems, you can automatically update documents and upload, make sure you can see better what's actually going on at the hospital. So I think this is really important. The same with the filing. It can seem really boring. I'm talking about filing, but if you get lost in your filing, get behind, that is really horrible. Because if just with 10 sites, 6 countries, doing the submission process on a pre-market product, submission to the authorities and to the ethics committee. In Europe, we don't have an aligned submission process, so all the packages will be different. And just, your brain will not be able to have the overview of all that.
No,
so
especially when you also get feedback from different input and
all over the place. So that's really important. Be systematic. And then I think it's important, and this is really for the startup companies, that regulatory and clinical goes hand in hand. This is not two separate things. You're going to provide data back into your technical file to be able to do a market release.
Exactly.
So don't think of them as two different processes.
No.
These need to be linked. And then I think that if we jump to the sites and the investigators and also the monitors, this is about finding the right team. Both at the sites, and if you work with a CRO or you have internal people, because what saves time and money is really to get a lean system. People that talk, communicates, that they really know what each other is doing, have a professional project manager that look at the efficiency, not as much as the, how do you say that? The underlying clinical indication, but really the operational part. Normally you would have someone who really likes their products in the companies, and they haven't tried to be operational with their clinical study.
Yeah.
So they don't think about speed.
No.
They think mostly about, and that's also important, that the product is being used the right way and all these things, and correctly collected patients. But this is about keeping the pace so that you will get data at the right time.
Yeah.
Before you run out of money, basically.
And it's also under the assumption that there is probably an overlying company strategy to release at a certain point or submit at a certain point.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a time aspect to consider because, of course, you have your preclinical testing that normally is time consuming, but this is probably one of the areas where we see most time consumption is in clinical studies.
It takes forever, right?
Yeah, and having that, as you describe, of a good site, a good investigator, a sponsor that understands the process and can document and do all the nitty-gritties, but it gets the wheels going.
Yeah.
It's super important for the overall process. So if there is like an overlaying time, there is a deadline normally for these studies.
Yeah.
And you actually also need to report on it. It is a requirement.
Yeah. If you take too long time, it's ethically not really.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think if we jump back to actually the session, one of the first sessions we had on user need, do it simple.
Yeah.
Don't overcomplicate this.
No.
Just collect the data which is needed to get you to the market, and then do all the other things afterwards if you're a startup company.
Yeah.
Because it costs really a lot of money. And you will realize when you're halfway and you're running dry of money that, maybe I should just have focused on this indication or this patient user group or whatever.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Don't do a lot of other investigator-initiated trials on the side and, get distracted.
Yeah.
Because you will not get your market access if you don't get the clinical data in place.
No, and it is a very big compromise of research and device development.
It is.
You be specific. That's device development.
Yeah.
Research is going around testing.
Yeah.
See whatever it fits into.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when children play with these forms and it's a square and they try to fit it in everything. That is a very long process instead of just putting the square in the square.
Yeah.
Right.
Just do the work. I have a client, he tells me that every time. Just do the work. To the point.
Yeah.
This is a huge topic. We'll keep it short and we will have other sessions on clinical investigation. But just to wrap it up, clinical investigation will be summarized into a final report.
Yeah.
And I think it just gives so many problems because writing that report, because people are not prepared.
No.
They don't start preparing on the data analysis and how are the data going to look like, what tables and listings do we need, which figures do we want, I had the other day, what is the source of our, have that traceability.
Yeah.
So this is when all the focus is gone from the trial, everyone is relaxing, and there is a poor medical writer sitting and trying to put everything together. Then they realize, oh my God, we didn't collect the right data, we cannot create the forms, how are we going to compare this and A and B and C? And it just gives a really bad reports. So early on, during the clinical study, prepare for how you actually want to end the study. That is my last advice in this session.
Yeah. And I must also add that we always use a biostatistician to make a statistical analysis plan to complete what you're talking about. Just to have that, first of all, set the power calculation on how many patients you need. But that is not the only thing it gives you. It gives you also what is going to be your expected output of it.
And we actually asked them also to create a dummy tables, listings, and forms.
Yeah.
So that our clients can can see what it is comes out in the other end, because then it's but this is not how I actually.
That's not what we want.
This is not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then we can correct it.
Yeah.
So cool. Very good. That was clinical investigation. So see you in the next session about post-market surveillance.